Hi, I'm Tessa from Tales from Outside the Classroom, and today I'm going to show you a simple system for tracking student data in Google Sheets. So first up, I have a blank Google Sheet up. You can do the same thing in Excel. In my part 2 video, I'm going to show you some ideas for putting this data together that might be helpful. And so for that reason, I'm using Google Sheets because it works a little bit better, in my opinion, for trying to compile information across several sheets. And more specifically for educators, I think it's a little bit easier to share with parents that way. So we're going to start off with a blank Google Sheet. Now, the first column I always use for name. You might choose to put a student ID number or some other demographically specific information here. You don't have to do that. You can just keep it name, especially if this is just for you. Sometimes you can choose to put one column for first name, one column for last name. You can choose to put them together. In my opinion, it really depends how far you want to take this data and what you might want to use it in the future for. So for this simple, straightforward first version, I'm just going to put student names in one column. And I'm going to do them alphabetically, but I'm going to do student first name first. So this is just going to generate some fake student names to get this list going. Okay, I have some student names all set in here. Obviously, a class would be much, much larger than this, but this was just a start. So you might have noticed I left the first row blank. I just tend to do this because I know I'm going to put things above this. Often several, but I don't know how many, so I just start with one and go from there. So for me, I sort of think backwards on what I want or what I want to include. So for me, I know I want to be able to enter raw scores and not percentages because I don't factor percentages in any of my work. So I always leave one column for raw scores and then one column to figure out that percentage. So I typically have two columns work together. So I'm going to go ahead and outline those just for myself visually as I'm thinking through what I'm going to do. I also like to have labels on things. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a row above and then just label this one as raw scores and this one as percentage. And in order to figure out the percentage, I'm going to have Sheets or Excel do that work for me. So I'm going to have a space for entering the points. So I'm going to label this points and then leave that one clear. And then I'm going to insert another row. And I like to have a standard. And you know what? I'm going to move this from here over to the left where I can name it. So, or I will name that whole row because the whole row will be that. Here, I am going to include the standard just because I like to have that standard identified when I'm referring back later. In my part 2 video, I will show you kind of how I use what's built in here and the standard listed here to put together a individual student report. Last, I'm going to call this one skill. So I am going to write a line, both of these, just so they're labeled. I'm also going to choose a better font than this. I'm going to click this corner, and I'm going to come through, and I'm a big fan of pop-ins, so I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to increase the font size for my student names a bit, and then this column a little bit smaller. All right, so I'm going to get started on some of my work. So I'm going to merge these cells. I once saw a TikTok that talked about not merging cells, and there was an easier way to do it, and now I can't find it again. I really wish I could find it, but anyway, I'm going to merge these cells just so that everything centers align nicely. So let's say this skill is adding and subtracting within 1,000. I could do it much more shorthand. My standard, I think that's MBT 3. Could be wrong. And let's say this quiz is out of 12 points, and this is part of the reason I do this way. So I know these columns are 2, wide for what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm also going to go ahead and wrap all of the text in this first row. So I'm going to go to Format, Text Wrapping, and wrap it. And what that does is it doesn't cut off what can't be seen in that cell. It makes the cell as wide or as deep or as long, however you want to call it, so all that text fits in. I'm also going to click over here in this box to select everything just like I did for font, and I'm going to center align everything. I typically like that much better. Now, you remember I had already right aligned those, so I'm going to go back and do that again. Maybe I would keep it center. I don't know. Sometimes I do things like this and then I adjust them 45 times until I find what I want. I'm going to go ahead and change this just to raw, and I'm going to go ahead and make this %. Just so it fits in there nicely and I don't have to worry about it. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to set up. So I'm going to take these out for now. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and leave them in. I'm going to go ahead and select column C. What I'm going to do is set up conditional formatting, and I'm going to set up conditional formatting for color coding. I like this because I like how it visually lets me know how a student is doing. I do it on the % column because the % column will always the conditional formatting I'm going to set up will always work in the % column, whereas if I did it in the raw score column, the number I enter in isn't going to be consistent. I'll show you what I mean after I have a couple in here. So I'm going to come here and go to Format, Conditional Formatting. Wait a second for it to load, and I'm going to come over here. Now, there's two different ways you can do this. You can set up a color scale, and a color scale basically allows you to put a minimum value, a mid value, and a max value, and set up those color codings according to that. With this, they do shading in between these colors. So for example, if I have this red, this yellow, this green, if I have a number that's somewhere in between the minimum and so minimum would be 0 and the midpoint 50, my color is going to change between that red and yellow. So there's going to be some oranges in between here. Between the yellow and the green, there will be some yellow greens, different shades of green, lighter green, that sort of thing. I don't prefer to do the color scale for this, but it's completely up to you. You obviously can. So in my column C, I'm going to come back and I'm going to do single color, and I'm going to just set up several of them. So I don't want is not empty. I always start with green because that's the way my brain works. So I start with this, anything in this column is greater than or equal to 75%, and it does recognize % there. It's going to change that to that green, and I'm going to click done. Then anything here that is between, let's say I want to do 60 to 75 as my yellow. So I'm going to say anything that is between 59 and I did 75. So I'm going to do 75 here. So that hopefully anything between 60 and 74%. Oops. Will turn yellow. I like these more subdued colors. And then last one, anything that is less than or equal to, I said 60, so less than or equal to 59% would be red. So just going to put this in and then show you. So anything that is greater than or equal to 75 would turn green. So that means 75% will be green. In the red, anything that is less than or equal to 59, so 59 and lower would be red, and in between there would be yellow. So I'm using those same numbers. It should work, but we'll double check in a second. So right now nothing is showing up there because I have nothing that is that value. So I'm going to show you how this works, or how I like to do this. So the raw score column I leave blank. This is where I enter in the number of points that student received. But the percentage, I'm going to come in and do a formula. So the percentage is equal to whatever is in that student's raw score. So in this case, it is B5. Because you see, this is row 5, and I want to look in that B column where the raw score is. So the percentage is whatever that student got right out of whatever is in row 3. So I can set up this formula to do this once, and it's going to be super helpful and work all the way across. So that's why this formula is really nice to build in. So I'm going to do over that divided by whatever is in that points row. So this time that is B3. And you notice, hit enter, it's going to take a second to load. My computer's being slow today. You notice there's nothing there for that B5. So it is sitting at 0 at the moment. The nice thing, this is a new feature in Google, is prompting me if I want to autofill. I'm going to say yes, but I'm going to show you how to manually do that as well. So the autofill says, I want to do the same thing here all the way down. If I come here and I see it's B5 over B3, if I come down, what happened is that it continued moving down. I don't want it to continue to move down. So I'm going to try to click here, and you see this little square that says I can apply that value or that formula as I come down. So I'm going to grab that and drag that corner square and see if that helps. It did not, so I'll show you what I'm going to do. So it's still that B6, and I'm just going to come through and change that denominator to B3 on each one. To finish. Okay, so now I'll show you how it works. So let's say Brad got 7 points. I put in 7. Brad's percent gets factored in. Let's say Victor got 9. That gets factored in, and you can see what is happening in that cell. Now, if you notice, these are not percentages. Even though I put the conditional formula as a percentage, these are not yet percentages because I did not format them that way, but the conditional formatting is recognizing them as the same. But I'm going to go ahead and change these settings because I like it to display the way I want it to display. So I'm going to go ahead and select that column, and I'm going to come over here to format, and it's the number. So I want to format the number in this cell as a percent. So you can see here the percent is set up to have 2 decimal places, or 2 places after the decimal. I'm going to go ahead and still click this percent so we can see this, but I'm actually going to come back to format and go to number, and I'm going to come to more formats and customize it, and I want to change it to one that does not have any decimal points. So I'm going to come here and select this one and apply it. Either way is up to you. If you want to be able to see what is after that decimal, you can keep it that way, or if you want to change it, it's just a quick second. So now I have my formatting set up most of the way I want it, but I'm going to show you a couple other super nice features that you can build in that might be helpful for you. So the next thing I'm going to show you how to build in is the Countif feature. I'm going to use this to count the number of students that were proficient on this assessment, so it helps give me a nice quick picture on how my students are doing on each assessment. So I'm going to select just this cell underneath my percentile. It's up to you. You could merge these, have these centered again, just like we have on the top. But for right now, I'm just going to click here. And I'm going to insert a formula. So I'm going to come over here to insert function, and this is a mathematical one. You can also find it under all, but I'm going to look for Countif. Countif says I need to start with my range. So my range is the percent column because this is the column that's going to show how my kids did. So I'm going to say C1 colon to whatever the row is above where I am. So I'm going to do C15 because that's how many students I have here. Then, and it gives you this example right here, I'm going to do comma to separate, comma, and a quotation mark. This is saying this is the exact value. Now, mathematical indicators work, so I'm going to say it's greater than 74%. And then that final closing parenthesis shows up for me. This is the criteria. So I started with equals Countif. The parenthesis was built in because I wasn't manually entering this formula, though you could. The range, comma, space, quotation mark, exactly what I want. Quotation mark, ending parenthesis. So you can see that along the top here. You can also see it in the example, and I'm going to hit enter. This time it's listing as a formula, so I'm going to change that back to, I think I want it to be just a number. So it's one student. So it had factored it into 100% because remember we changed this column to say 100%. The conditional formatting is also showing up because I had it in this column. So I'm going to actually take this and move this by cutting it and pasting it in this column where that formula, those formulas aren't built in. So it's no longer in that C column where I set up those formatting. It's in the B, so it's just counting it. So I'm going to go ahead and label this as number of students proficient and make this text a lot smaller. So now I know how many of my students are proficient. Now I want to figure out my students' average because I don't know about you, but that gives me a good picture on overall how did my kids do. And it's nice because I can build this in and it takes 5 seconds or it takes no seconds, 5 seconds for me to build it in, and then all along the way, the spreadsheet will do it for me. So that's super helpful and nice in my mind. So I'm just going to come through and set up that average. So I'm going to again come back to insert a function. And I believe if I come to all, average would be pretty quick. But I'm going to actually go to math just to show you. Oh, it's actually not in math. Oh, it's on top here. So the average. Notice this count is here, and I did not use this for that number of students because I didn't want a count of my students. I wanted a count if they met certain criteria. So that's why we had to go to that count if, so that the criteria was factored in. So anyway, I'm going to come to the average, and it's the same sort of thing. So I'm going to average whatever gets put in. My first row is 5, so I could do 5 just so that the numbers or whatever is showing up in my informational cells at the top don't get factored in. So I'm going to do B5 to B15 because that's where my student information is. And then I can continue doing more, but I'm just going to leave that way. So my average is an 8 because all it sees is a 7 and a 9. I'm going to actually take, again, this little square, which applies it anywhere I'm dragging it to, so I can apply that down. I don't want to, but I'm going to drag that over, and it's giving me my average of the students whose scores have been entered here. Now you notice this average is a 12%, and if I'm averaging 58% and 75%, the average is for sure not 12. What's happening is all these students that don't have scores, these zeros, are also getting factored in, but I can fix that. Instead of doing just a regular average function, I can come in here and do an average if, just like the Countif was count if it's above this percent. I'm going to average it if it's greater than 0. Now, the limitation here is your students might get a 0 on an assessment, and then they're not calculated into your average. My hope is you won't have any students that get a complete 0. There might be a better way to do this. I just don't know what that is. This is what worked best for me. So anyway, I just came in and put if, and I need to add that criteria that I'm averaging it if it's greater than 0. And then hitting enter, and then you can see it's in there. So I'm going to come back in again and change that number to try to have 2 decimal points. So now it's 67. I can again change that to a percent if I would like. So my average percent is that 66.67 or 67%, which would be the average of these two, because that also would be 8 out of 12. So sometimes it's nice to look at it this way. Again, the limitation here is if your student actually got a 0, their score is not being factored in. So I have these formulas set up. Let's say this is as far as I want to go as building formulas in for the start. I'm going to go ahead and delete what I have in here because these were just examples to show you. You notice this goes back to white because it does not change until I put that point total in there. Then it's ready for me to enter. So it's not full red all along the way. So let's say this is what I'm going to use to track my assessments all year long. So I'm literally just going to copy and paste this over and over. So I'm going to change the outside border just to make it visually separated. I'm going to come in here and then just continue to pick those left columns and paste them. The nice thing, and I will show you that in a moment, the nice thing is all of my formulas have transferred over. So remember how I had to manually go through and change that denominator to be 3 to work it correctly? I don't have to continue to do that. It remembers it's a D3, and it's applying it to that same place in these columns when I've copied and pasted. If you don't know the manual shortcuts for copy and paste, they are, I can select these. On a PC, it's Control-C. On a Mac, I believe it's Mac-C to copy. So I select it and do Control-C. And then I come over here and I hit Control-V. Again, on a PC, I think on a Mac, it's Mac-V to paste. And it takes just a second. It's so many less steps. So I can continue doing this all along the way. For math, I love using this tracking system to track my math scores because I can take a quick look to see how my kids are doing on a specific assessment, and I can have all of their assessment data in one place. It's super helpful for me. I'm going to show you just a couple other quick things that you might find helpful. So I initially told you that I was going to put all the student names here. If you are going to track all of your data in one place, you might like to have a name sheet. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a new sheet that's just completely blank, and this might be my name sheet. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to cut out these names and I'm going to paste them here. And maybe this is where I constantly put my student names, so it's one running log. So notice that they're deleted here. Well, I can tell this sheet where to get the information to know what names to put in. This is helpful if I have lots of sheets like this. Let's say I have one of these sheets for reading, one of these sheets for grammar, one for spelling, one for math, one for something else. Up to you. But if I have a lot of sheets, it's a lot easier for me to put the names in once and have them repopulate. So the names are in this sheet too. I can rename this. I know you can't quite see it at the bottom there, but that drop-down arrow gives me a menu. I'm going to rename it to names. I'm going to come back over here. Now I had my name starting in that column that says A1, not that column, that cell. So I'm going to come over here and say that this is equal to, and I need to identify this sheet. The sheet I called names A1. Missed it. Exclamation mark A1. So you see it pasted it here. Now it pasted it exactly as it looks here. Or it did not paste it in that pop-in. So I'm going to just come through and change this all to pop-ins again, maybe after I'm done. So I can take that little arrow and continue to drag it down, just like as I did before. And it took that formula and applied it with changing one at a time. So I only have to enter that formula once and apply it all the way down. And now I don't need to continue to put my names over and over and over again. Even if it's just copying and pasting, I find this a little easier, especially if I'm working with multiple sheets within one. So my sheet is set up and ready to go, but let's say a new student moves in. So I'm going to come select the row, the last row before I have things, and I want to insert one above. And then I need to get these formulas all the way down. Now, the downside is once I've set it up, trying to add things is more manual, because even if I take and drag this corner down, remember it doesn't exactly just apply. If I try copying and pasting, like the whole row, I could do that, but it doesn't work because it applies that other value. So I always recommend starting out with way more rows you're going to need, because once you do it that one time in that one column and copy and paste it over, that's so much more quick than trying to come through and add it later. The nice thing is, let's say I add a whole bunch of rows. I'm going to just add several here just to show you. So let's say I have a whole bunch of extra rows because I want to make sure this doesn't happen. Well, if I don't need them, I can select all the rows I don't need by selecting their numbers and clicking and dragging. once they're all highlighted, I could right click here and hide them. And so now I can have that bottom information I want to be able to see quickly with my last student without them getting in my way or having to scroll past them. And then I'm ready to add additional kids later if I want that or need that. One more feature I want to show you, I can come all the way over at the end, or I can choose to do it here. I also can, I'm going to insert a column and make it a little thinner. I'm also going to make an average score for each student. So I can select here, click that equal sign, and again, average. And this time, instead of that continued range like I showed you earlier, I'm going to pick each column that I need. So you notice here that average percent is, you can see here, it's FHJLN. So I can manually do that all along the way. So I'm going to average, A would be name, B is raw score. So it's C3, F3, H3. It's really nice when you can see it. J3, sometimes I have to say the alphabet to find the next one. L, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. So this is all along here. Now after Z, we go to A. AA would be the one I'm not using. AB would be what I'm using. AC I would not. AD I would. Close that and then hit enter. Now, because these are all div 0, they are not being used here. You can see even AB, AC, AD you can't see, but those would be the next column. So if I came over here and copied and pasted these, AB is going to be where that is, and then I can keep going. So I could have that average of how the kid does on all of it as a quick view next to their name, just to help give me a glimpse and keep track of that student's overall performance. I also can come through and make this look a whole lot neater and nicer. This is just a quick, how do I build these formulas in so I can track my student data here. My part 2 video is going to go more in depth on building pivot tables so I can have overall averages, so I can track individual questions and see how students did, how I can set up conditional formatting beyond just percents and go into much more detail. This is just a quick glimpse. I'm also in my blog post that I will link in the show notes here. I also will give away a template set up this way so that you have a blank one to start with that you can grab and go and use in case you don't want to build your own. I am showing you this one so you know how to tweak it to adjust it to meet your needs. I would love to hear in the comments what else you would like to learn.